Okay. And that's all I have to do. I'm on. Okay, and there's dinner up in the kitchen in the pan. Okay. But it's not, it's unmuted now.
Roommate off in quarantine and Joe's all by his lonesome.
Yeah. Jimmy's in a house with 7 other guys. Jimmy's like, I'm tired of cleaning. He's the only guy that cleans apparently, but one of the roommates got hauled off to the embassy suites for 10 days.
Testing, Dory, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, perfect. Glad you could join this way.
Me too.
And we can hear you just fine, so I'm gonna share the presentation, so let me know if you can't see it.
And now they're doing surveillance testing.
Oh, wow.
So today, yesterday was one test, which for percentage, less, I don't know, half of a percentage point. So all the helicopter parents are checking the dashboard daily. I mean, how about Arizona? I mean, are they doing a dashboard or anything like that?
I think they've got all kinds, Arizona was really, that guy Robbins, they probably were the most progressive with regard to all of the things. In fact, that guy Robbins, he's been on the Today Show, all the morning shows for the last 6 months. I mean, always talking about what Arizona. So they're about as, it's like if Arizona has.
Can you see that, Dory?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, thank you.
They've really got it down. But the issue though still is the off-campus stuff.
It looks like we have about 5 minutes, and then we'll get the meeting started.
That's where the issue.
Okay.
I have a good friend whose son is a senior at MSU in Tallahassee. My friend lives in Charlotte. She's like, Patrick's coming home today. He lives in an apartment. But he just feels like he can't control they're not following the rules.
Right.
Like, I'm not feel safer. And not worry about contaminating it. Saturday. Poor guy. But the good news, kids are positive, they're not getting terribly sick.
No, that's right. Although a friend of ours, she's going to Missouri. She's a freshman. And, so she's 18 years old. She tested positive. She has all the symptoms. Everyone. Chest pains, fever, loss of smell, loss of taste. I mean, she's got, I haven't heard of any young person.
Not all that. I've heard the loss of taste, fever,
Yeah, exactly.
low grade, whatever, achy, but
In fact, our kids are trying to figure out to get them the antibody test because both of them said like way back in January or February. They didn't say anything to us at the time. They said, I lost my sense of taste way back in January, so it's like, we need to get you the antibody test to see if you had it or not. So,
Yeah, we were in Arizona at the end of February. The week before that, we were at Notre Dame for Junior Parents Weekend. It was Valentine's weekend. But so that was the 14th and 21st in Arizona. And my husband got super sick, like bad cough, no fever, just like weird. And then I got it, like we were super sick, and they were from my firm that had the same thing. Ken's like, I wonder if he took a regular test like months ago.
Yeah, well, the regular test.
It's not going to show anything. And so.
And then even the antibody, they're saying, it dwindles. So it's like, if you take that 6, 7, 8 months ago, it might not show.
Might not show. It's just very strange. It's the whole thing. You're like, well, maybe we had it, but I'm not betting on it. But it would be nice if the boys,
Exactly.
My son said that the problem is some of the kids that tested positive or have had it, they're kind of like, I've had it.
I'm
bars,
good to go.
Whatever. Like,
Exactly.
I've survived.
Exactly.
I'm bulletproof. So,
which goes with 18, 19, 20-year-olds anyway, right?
It does, right. They don't need me help in that
It's like we
regard.
become bulletproof to kryptonite.
They don't need that.
How you doing?
Oh, I have a filter in this mask and it is so hot.
Oh.
Just a coffee.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
This is like a little mask with a coffee, but then I just put it in the coffee filter. Like, oh.
Yeah.
We've got 3 so we need at least one more
For quorum?
We need one
4.
So long time no see.
Yeah.
There we go.
Especially live. Yeah.
And then just a reminder for Dory to hear us, everybody will need to talk into the mics. So heads up on that. Hey, Bill. Good. How are you? Thank you. Yeah, on the bottom mic, the right one. Yes, 2 minutes, but this is being live streamed and recorded, so everybody is aware. I'm sorry? Starting now.
Hold on.
What are you? Oh, right. I know, it's got that provision in
Hey, David. How are you?
Okay, you got that hard copy?
It is actually at your seat, so you are good to go.
I don't either. I just want to highlight it though, so that.
F5.
Yeah.
Which it's 5 now, so yeah. Okay.
Good evening, the September 28th, 2020 meeting of the Cherry Hill Village Planning and Zoning Commission will now come to order at 5 p.m. This meeting is being held in conformance with the public health orders and guidelines from the Dakota Department of Public Health and Environment and the Tri-County Health Department. Roll call, please.
Holland.
Present.
Kaplan.
Present.
Lemaire. Lucas. Miles. Miller. And Wyman. You have a quorum.
And now for the pledge of allegiance, please. Ma'am?
Whoever is speaking now, I can't hear it.
I'm sorry, Dory, we're doing the pledge of allegiance.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So right now, I guess the next step is to determine if we have any audience participation.
Yeah, no one signed up. There's nobody signed up for audience participation.
Okay, so we will move on to item number 5, which is the consent agenda. Do we have one? Okay, and now we're going to go on to number 6, which is new business. Director Kramer?
Is this the PowerPoint?
Yes, you can go ahead and click. And then it's staff memo and then yours.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we are here tonight to discuss a sketch plat, which is a mandatory first step that precedes the quasi-judicial hearing on the subsequent preliminary plat. The subdivision process in Cherry Hills Village is a 3-step process. The first step is a sketch plat that we'll discuss tonight. The second step is the preliminary plat, which is heard by both planning and zoning and city council. The final step is the final plat, which is heard only by city council. Because the preliminary plat will likely be considered simultaneously with the site plan amendment request, the commission should review the sketch plat without regard to those other applications. Any suggestions or recommendations made on the sketch plat shall not be construed as support or lack of support for any other pending application not yet before the commission. So the plat before you tonight is a potential replat of the parcel located at 3800. Well, it's technically the second amended plat of Lot 1, Block 1, Highline Meadows in Cherry Hills Village. The owner is the Denver First Church of the Nazarene. The project representative in this case is Steve Ferris, who is present tonight, located at 3800 East Hamden Avenue. The property is currently zoned R1, which is a 2.5 acre residential lot zoning. However, there is a attending application in for a rezoning of this parcel to change the zoning to R4. So the proposal before you is to take the single lot that is zoned R1, and what we're discussing tonight is the sketch plat to change that into multiple lots that would be zoned R4. So the reason the zoning would matter is the lot size minimums to understand if those minimums would be met. That's the reason I'm talking about the rezoning. The 4 lots that would be platted would exceed the minimum lot size under the R4 zoning district. So as you can see from the vicinity map, we have Hamden Avenue to the north. Denver First, the proper, if you will, is to the east, the Covington neighborhood to the south, the Highline Canal to the west. So staff attempted to research previous sketch plats in an effort to ensure that we're meeting the commission's expectations while also providing consistency. It appears the sketch plat process it has not occurred too many times recently, very many at all. So we wanted to just take a moment to remind you specifically what the code says our role is here tonight. And the 2 primary sections are contained on your screen in front of you. I'm not going to read these to you. They were in your packet. They're also up on the screen. But in short, this is an opportunity for the commission to ask questions and provide whatever comments or recommendations you think is appropriate to ensure compliance with the code or other city codes. So that's really the purpose of tonight's meeting. And we have on the screen, these are also in your packet, but we have on the screen both the sketch plat itself and a proposed drainage plan that will go along with that sketch plat. You can see there's 4 lots. There is an easement on the north side, a 50-foot wide easement running east-west that will be that will be dedicated upon if the plat were to be approved. And its function is obviously to help with the trail connection between the Highline Trail and the underpass that's currently being constructed along Hamden, or underneath Hamden, I should say. So from a big picture perspective, it's a fairly straightforward plat that does meet the minimum lot sizes. It does show the drainage going from north to south with a pond in the southwest portion of the plattable area. So staff is available for any questions you might have. And again, the applicant representative, Mr. Ferris, is present as well.
Okay, and does the applicant have any additional information regarding the sketch plat submittal?
No, yes.
I guess the key, you gotta make it red.
No.
No, not that one.
At the base of the mic.
Base of the mic.
Thank you. The only thing I would add to Chris's presentation is that these lots were platted originally for 5 lots under the Covington subdivision. They were previously zoned R3A, and they were rezoned in 2013 to R1 to accommodate the church needs at that time. I just wanted you to know the history. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and before we start addressing comments and concerns from the commissioner, I just wanted to also remind you that there's no discussion that's going to be related to any of the applications the applicant may have before the city currently. It's just the sketch plat alone. So with that said, I would like to open up the floor if anyone has any comments, questions regarding the sketch plat.
No question. The only question I have is, it does show the contour lines, and presumably the drainage is going from north to south to the detention pond, etc. But there are no numbers on the contour lines which give an indication as to whether it slopes from east to west, west to east. The contour intervals, they're there, but there are no numbers on them, so it's a little hard to follow. And I assume that you're showing existing uses on this sketch plat, which would include access points to and from the parking. Those look like curb cuts, but are those curb cuts going to follow? Will they be applicable to the lots themselves, or will there be a separate driveway for each lot? This is a little unclear to me at this point.
Understood. I'll let Mr. Ferris talk to you a little bit further about the drainage, but the shaded out gray with the parking lot layout, including the curb returns on the access, those are all just attempting to show and give perspective about what's there today. The sketch plan contains no information about access or layouts of the potential future lots.
Then are we to assume that the east-west lines running, there are 3 of them, are those the lot boundaries, or is that something else?
Those are the lot boundaries.
Could the speaker identify himself or herself before speaking? This is Doris Kaplan.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Just to answer the question, this is Steve Ferris again on the drainage. That's a good point. Those contour lines should have been labeled with elevations. But there is also a conceptual drainage plan submitted with this. And I think that's where that information can be found. And it wasn't transferred to the actual plat document, those elevation drawings. But you read it correctly by the arrows and stuff and how it flows.
Any other questions? Dory, do you have any questions?
No, I don't at this time. Thank you.
Okay, then, I guess we're finalizing this issue for the evening. And moving on to the master plan.
Yes.
And this is a follow-up to the conversation we had at last month's meeting. And Mr. Ferris, I appreciate you being here. We've moved on, so if you're just extremely interested in planning processes, by all means, you feel free to stay. So at the August 11th P&Z meeting, we discussed suspending the master plan process temporarily due to the inability to meet through the community-wide meetings that the commission felt were vital. Furthermore, the Citizens Advisory Task Force felt that it was really difficult to do that with the current limitations that exist for in-person meetings. With that said, there was a discussion about suspending that, and to do that, we need to actually make a formal motion to City Council to suspend this process. So we're just following up on the last discussion that we had on bringing this back to you for a formal action. If the commission does vote to do this, it would go before City Council, the first meeting in October. I will add one item that was not a part of our discussion last time. The reason I'm doing it now, remember, this will not go to City Council until early October. But the Community Development Liaison on City Council, Councilman Dan Sheldon, is the designated Community Development Liaison. In his efforts to be a liaison, he'd requested to know the status of the project and asked to see a copy of the survey. After providing him with the survey, he relayed to me that he has questions and possible feedback on a couple of them. The commission may recall that Councilor Sheldon was really felt very strongly about the expanded residential type question. And I think he has some questions on that question, as well as a few of the others that he noticed throughout, and I think has some possible suggestions. So what he had requested is, if it would be possible, and no one needs to take formal action on this, this is just something that we could do as a course of business. If we could get a couple of volunteers to have a Zoom call with our team here and Councilor Sheldon, we could meet in the next week or two, which would allow us enough time to hear what his thoughts are and incorporate those changes that were appropriate, that the two representatives thought was a good idea, and we could still incorporate those prior to this being voted on by City Council in early October. So that would be the one bit of an update, I guess, I would have for the commission prior to the vote.
Okay, do we have any volunteers?
Yeah, we should do it.
Okay,
And I should have mentioned, by the way, I did talk to Commissioner Lemaire, and he was fully supportive of in fact, he was excited about the opportunity to have a couple of people meet with Mr. Sheldon.
good.
The one thing I would say, though, would be good is if Councilor Sheldon could, in addition to his own comments, in other words, what are council's comments just generally? I mean, in other words, he could, we don't need to have a formal thing, but I mean, to the extent that he's got comments that could kind of represent more broadly what council, so we take those all into account, that would be good.
I would agree, that would be good. I don't think, however, that the survey was disseminated to council asking for input. So I don't think any of them have done the steps that Councilor Sheldon has. The only reason he did is because A, he's the liaison, and B, he was especially interested in that one question.
Let me rephrase. I think it would be good if Councilor Sheldon talked with the other members and just expressed their views and got any views that they might have, so we can incorporate those into his own thoughts.
Understood, I get it. Sounds good.
Who just spoke?
Sorry, that was Earl.
I was volunteer for that Zoom conference.
Great.
Perfect, you got your 2 volunteers.
Perfect.
Okay. So before we move on to making the recommendation, is there any other questions or comments that we have?
I do, and I hope I'm not revisiting things here, but I went through the questions and I have quite a few comments. I don't know if this is the time to speak to a few of them or share them later.
So we have had a couple of commissioners who had, I guess, I would call them sort of maybe not grammar, but wordsmithing or nothing substantive, but more dealing with the questions themselves. And they've had the opportunity to email those to us. But if it was something more substantive or policy related, I would suggest that this is the more proper place to have that conversation.
Okay, let me just, let me just make a few comments, particularly on questions 1 and 2. We talked about the issue of semi-rural. And I think there's a lot of, I know there's people who are confused on what that is. We've had a tough time defining that. But as I read this, it seems to me you're asking the question, what is it? But then you're saying, or you're implying that it is going to be in the master plan. And because, and the way I see it is question 1. Survey completed as part of 2008 master plan indicated that preserving the semi-rural character of Cherry Hills was very important to residents. Do you agree that preserving the semi-rural character? I'm not sure that sentence, that second sentence belongs. I do think something along the lines, however, semi-rural character has different connotations among different residents and the way it's defined. Maybe making a statement, which I think is a statement of fact, that has confused things. I go to the second question and it says, which of the following should be enhanced or preserved to provide for the semi-rural character? Well, what if in question 1, I'm not going with semi-rural? What if my answer is, I don't want that? To me, we're trying to define this, and I think there's a better way to just state there's been confusion with semi-rural. And then what aspects do you consider characteristics of Cherry Hills? If you live in certain areas, yes, it certainly does feel semi-rural. But if you live in North Cherry Hills, if you live in the Buell, if you live in Devonshire Heights with me, it's not rural in any shape or form. And I think, I'm beginning to think the semi-rural concept might be more neighborhood oriented, that certain neighborhoods would embrace that, or certain zoning districts in the 2.5 acre zoning. But I think we're trying to implement this, and there's been controversy with semi-rural, and I'm trying to take that controversy out. And that's my concern in these 2 first questions. And I can get into, I'm happy to share my notes, but I think we're leading the witness too often on this whole concept of semi-rural. And I think we ought to let people perhaps talk about how they define the village and what characteristics are important, and then see if that semi-rural fits into it. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to convey there.
It certainly, I'm not on the commission, so but from my perspective of just trying to follow along, absolutely. I think ultimately, especially from somebody who's not been a part of previous processes, who's coming at this from the outside a little bit, I think the semi-rural character question is going to generate the most discussion, simply because it's also been leveraged or used the most, as it's almost been a tool that you throw at things when you don't like something. And so therefore it needs to be addressed somehow. I think really the question is, how do we define it? And I think there was some feedback, especially from council early on, that we want to make sure that that's still the vision. This is a vision document. Is that the vision? But then if we don't define what that is, then that vision gets used in any number of different ways that are often mutually exclusive. I think what you're saying is true, but I think we still have a task at hand, which is still trying to figure out, semi-rural has been called the vision. Is that is that still the vision? And then that leads to the, how do we define that vision? So maybe there's a different way to skin that cat. And Brett, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about this as well. If you have any additional thoughts, but yeah, I think this is, in some ways for this survey, this is the crux of the whole survey, in my opinion, is this
To me,
question.
maybe it's a short sentence or two that say, we've struggled with this as a community. What is a semi-rural thing? And just define it and put it out there. And then get into what characteristics, if you believe we're semi-rural, are important, because as we all know, they conflict. You know, above ground utility lines may be considered by some as semi-rural, and by others, you bury them and you don't have them. So it goes both ways. But I think in some of these, in questions 2 and 3, I'm fearful we're leading the witness, so to speak, with this concept of semi-rural, and trying to have them kind of agree that it is as they answer the questions.
And I think, this is Earl, I see Bill's point on that. I mean, I know I've been one that wanted to see this whole semi-rural thing fleshed out more than it was, just for the reasons that Bill's articulated. But as we've gone through it, I struggled exactly with, okay, so how do we say it? What do we say? And I see the problems exactly that you're pointing out. I wish I had some good notes to kind of explain it better, but as I kind of saw it, as we were going through this, I realized we're not going to come up with the right question to really get at this with the survey, but what we need to do is come up with something or some questions that at least start to give some feedback that allows us to, when we have the public meetings, I think that's when we're really going to get in. At least that's what I'm envisioning at one time. Because then it's not, you're not tied to the words per se. You're sitting there going, hey guys, come on, let's have a discussion here and talk about this. Let's get it going. This relates to that. Well, I'm all for trying to do the best job we can with these questions, but I know that given the fact that this was a big concern for me as well, and then I struggled with, okay, how do we ask this question? What are the words we do use to get at exactly what we're talking about? And if you've got something like, that'd be great. Love to look at it.
I submit that the term semi-rural today may have a different connotation than it did in 2008. And in 2030, it may have yet another connotation. So to try and establish a definition in a document which has an element of vision in it, you're putting in something with the definition using something solid in a document that basically is going to float. And the concern I have, if you do it that way, is that the definition will wind up sinking.
And I can see that, and I think that's right. I think to a large degree, that's happened over the years. And so I would agree with you, absolutely, what it was in 2008 versus now versus 2030. And as Bill was talking about it, I realized, if you moved into Devonshire from Lodo, that probably is actually semi-rural. But if you moved into it from over on Cherry Lane, you probably move more into an urban area. The real issue here is, and I'm sure planning and zoning heard it. I know I heard it on Board of Adjustment of Appeals when I was on. I heard it on council. Everybody grabs onto this word semi-rural and just bangs the living hell out of it all the time with regard to what they want. And in addition to that creating problem, you realize that as a city, we're not doing our job at the end of the day. If we're giving disparate sections and disparate citizens the same tool to utilize in any manner that they want to. We need to do a better job in terms of trying to come up with something. And it might even be getting rid of it altogether. We might even not even use semi-rural. We might just start to talk about characteristics and what have you. But that term semi-rural just has caused a lot of problems amongst, like I say, at least Board of Adjustment, as well as at council. And you guys probably can tell me whether you seen stuff pop up on planning and zoning, but it's caused an issue. And we need to try to do something to eliminate that issue.
Right. This is Brett from Rick speaking, just speaking with a mask on, so please, you can all hear me. I confer with Earl's comments. This is not a be all end all of the character discussion. Those public meetings will be very instructive in terms of getting more input, qualitative and quantitative, from the residents of what they mean by character, what the character desired is. You know, I think I have a couple ideas coming out of the discussion here right now. Question 2, kind of tying back with what you indicated. Question 1 could be left with kind of an open-ended discussion of what character you see for the community, or what do you see as semi-rural, or some variation of that sort. You could actually just take the word semi-rural out of question number 2 and just have it be which of the following elements should be enhanced or reserved for the character. And then become a bit more of a implementation type question tied to character, right? And leaves the semi-rural discussion more in question 1. That's perhaps one idea. But again, we're open to all ideas you all may have.
I agree with that. That's scratching my mind. And begin to take that word out, those words, thinking it's just more generic. It's less biased, if you will. But I also think, as I said earlier,
Bill,
I think.
Your microphone. Bill, can we just get your mic? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think it's fair also to just acknowledge up front, we're confused as a community as to what this is. You know, it's ambiguous. And we're trying to, you know, to put definition, understanding. It may not include, it may not. And I'm not trying to be verbose, but I just think a short little sentence that states that up front, and this may or may not be part of the vision of the master plan.
Well, I would say the sentence you voiced earlier, however, semi-rural has different connotations on residents. I mean, that's simply a fact. So I think that's fair game, and I think legitimate to put here. I think, you know, there's different routes to question 1. You could just take out the ranking strongly agree in terms of the you know, the views on the term semi-rural, and just make this question more of an open-ended, you know, short essay kind of question, where you ask a question like, what is your sense of the character? Is it semi-rural? Is it something else? Please explain. You can just make it very general and open like that. That's one option as well.
Well, and the other thing, which, and I agree with taking it out, I mean, we could also just hit it straight on.
Right.
And just sit there and go, as we all know, that semi-rural term has been used, and it means 6,500 different things to 6,500 different residents.
Mm-hmm.
It's a horrible term. I don't say that. But the point is, it's like you just say, this has been my problem. So without using the word semi-rural, please tell us how you would describe our community. Because by the way, you have to tell them not to use it because they use it. They sit back and say, well, semi-rural. Thanks a lot, Calvin, was all that. They might come back and say it's bucolic.
Manager, what if we just simply said along the lines of what you said, instead of, it almost feels like we'd still be leading the witness if we then gave a couple of examples. What if we just, instead of making it positive or negative or anything, just made it very neutral and said, yeah, please describe what your desirable character of the village is. End of story. And that way there's no rural, urban, maybe what folks really view as the valuable character of the community has nothing to do with some of the things we're spending all this time talking about, and maybe that's their vision. So maybe we just start off with a broad introductory thing that allows people to go where they want it to go, instead of us.
And you might get a pretty wide range of inputs on that.
You might, and maybe that's okay, though. It may not help us explicitly with the semi-rural character question, but at least it starts without hemming anybody in. Or
again, my only concern with that, this is Earl again, would be we'd all then be sitting here going, well, we know we didn't get what we want, but everybody kept using that word semi-rural.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, that's true.
And either A, there's got to be a definition for it, and I think David's comments are right on the money with regard to trying to define it. Well, you got to move away from that term to something more more specificity with regard to what our community means to us, et cetera. But if you leave it like that, you know,
You get some.
I'm telling you right now, 75% of the responses are gonna have that word semi-rural, and we're all gonna be grabbing onto that, going, wow, we got 100 responses and 75 of them use the word semi-rural, and we're gonna be driven towards accepting that.
So Earl, your suggestion is to straight up say semi-rural has been a problematic term. We're trying to use something different. Using other terms, how would you describe the vision of Cherry Hills Village? Right.
Unlike some of the society today, my thing is when the truth fits, use it. It's like, that is our problem. I mean, it really is.
Well,
I think it's a great discussion point. When I think of the village, semi-rural doesn't really come to my mind, you know? I mean, I think a lot of, maybe a lot of young families come in for other reasons, like school district, or it's centrally located to DTC in downtown. And maybe semi-rural really isn't on the minds of many of these new families moving in and the turnover that we're seeing. So I'm open for any broad discussion as to why residents have moved to Cherry Hills Village personally.
This is Britta. I'm here now. I've had similar thoughts. You may have given the background as to where semi-rural came from to start with. And this whole, it's interesting. I was asked that question when I was applying to be on planning and zoning. Was in my interview, one of the questions was, how do you define semi-rural, and are you supportive of that as a characteristic of or do you believe that's characteristic of the village, something to that effect? But I do think that as I've muddled through all of this, I think there's an influx of new families moving to the village. Some of them are coming from Los Angeles, they're coming from Chicago. I think that you may get a really different perspective that does not include the semi-rural term. I think if we put it out there as is the way this is framed, I think then it leads people down that path. So I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what kind of feedback we really do get.
Since I noted all these, may I add a few other comments here?
sure.
In Q4, we're talking about lighting. And we talked about the current dark sky ordinance limits options for lighting in various contexts in the village, including exterior lighting, blah, 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 in order to limit negative impacts from excessive lighting. This policy may limit the type of lighting that residents, schools, and folks may use. In this question, are you in support of maintaining dark sky regulations to limit light pollution in the village? To me, that's like asking, are you in favor of pollution? That's the other way around it. And I think it's a biased question. I think people may struggle in communities, where you have schools and churches, and they may want more safety light. And I think sometimes safety gets in the way of dark skies, so there's a conflict there. And I would just strike to limit light pollution, because I think you're guiding who is not against different forms of pollution, whether it's light or in other areas. But I can see if you live in a certain area, you might not view that as light pollution.
Right.
Fair point, but would you be amenable then to simply eliminate that last question? And let it go with the policy may limit types of lighting, residence, schools, or clubs. We'll leave it there.
Yeah, and leave it open, because I want people to speak to it. And I don't want them to feel that,
You put in the dark skies implication, not you personally.
Right.
There's the dark skies implication is in there twice in the first and second sentence, the term is used. So that somewhat sets the tone of the question. The dark sky is, the dark sky is a policy, it's an ambition, whatever you want to call it. And then give people the opportunity to say, yeah, I like it, or no, I don't like it, or well, it depends on the location.
I agree. With everything. That makes sense.
Well, so you want to take out that last question, which is the actual question, which it was a yes, no, I don't know. Are you suggesting just an open-ended kind of short essay kind of question then?
I think there's legitimate questions about does dark sky interfere? I think for most people it's security or a feeling of wayfinding. And there are lights designed to love. And I'm not sure everybody's aware of that. But to me, when I just read that, dark sky regulations to limit, are you in favor of that? Limiting light pollution. It sort of says, what if you say no? I'm all for light pollution.
I definitely
That's
hear
the
that.
opposite.
Right, taking out the words to limit light pollution, but are you suggesting just taking out that whole question entirely?
Not the entire question, just the last sentence.
Just the last sentence.
Okay.
Quote, are you in support of maintaining dark sky regulations to limit light pollution in the village? Delete.
But then there's
And
no,
still,
but then there's no
leaves you a
question.
number, still leaves you a number of opportunities to answer.
To answer what though? We need a question.
So then can you say, do you agree after or clubs may use period, do you agree, question mark, yes, no?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, the actual question. Yeah. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
And my next comment. In the housing. We have the municipal code. Only single family residence. Oh, here I was confused. So we have this clause that says only allows single family detached homes and guest homes that are not available for rent in certain locations. So does this mean guests are available, guest houses are available for rent in certain locations, or does it mean they're not available in certain locations? I can read that both ways,
Yeah.
I guess, and it's a parenthetical, but I think I'm getting tripped up on.
Well, I think the phrase, Chris, would be something like guest houses that may not be used for rentals, right? Yes.
The guest houses are only,
Just take out the parentheses.
the guest houses are only available in a few locations, and in no case are they available for rental.
right, that is the statement.
I like that. And then in question 7, I don't like the second clause. What is the reason behind your selection? And you're asking questions about, driving locals. I don't always have an answer or a reason for why I might, prefer walking or bicycling or equestrian or, that second question that's repeated. I'm just thinking, give them the option to write if they want to express it, but I'm not sure I would ask for it.
I believe, and this is Chris, I believe the second part of this came from a discussion with you indicating that the first question by itself provided limited feedback to you and that you wanted to provide opportunities for people to tell you why so that it had much more value. If we want to change that, absolutely fine. But that's how we got with the two-parter. Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Are you saying you meaning me or?
no, the plural you.
Guilty of re-editing.
If somebody specific requested the change, I will use their name.
I know.
Earl, your microphone.
Sorry, I know I was one that was in favor of that, so I'll keep guilty. Or take responsibility for that. And I can see though, when you see it in black and white, maybe it's too forceful type of a thing, but my whole point when we were talking about this was, we really need to do everything we can to get our community just not to check the box. Tell us what you're thinking. And I gotta be honest with you, and I'll say it. If you don't really have a reason behind you check the box, I'm gonna take that input. But I'm not gonna give it anywhere near the emphasis as it will for somebody who knows why they think what they do. I'm just telling you, that's where I come from. So I really want to try to get our folks to tell us as much of what they're thinking as we possibly can. Yeah, what is the reason behind it? Maybe that's a little too,
Yeah, maybe it's just the wording,
maybe we can
right?
soften it up or whatever, but.
Yeah, maybe that's.
But I'd like to kind of encourage everybody to give us as much as they can, because I think that's what, we really gotta find out how people think what they think. I say that is because I literally have had people that have sat back and said, on traffic, I like for the roads to be plowed because it keeps people from, it was lunacy. And I want to know if that's what you think, because then I can dismiss it.
Would it be preferable to ask what is the reason aspect in conjunction with the following sentence? If you believe improvements are needed, how would you do it? And what is the reason? Might it be better to put a reason would be specific, more specific to the question rather than just kind of out there?
Can you read that again, real quick? Did you?
Okay, driving on local streets, instead of having what is the reason behind your selection, have it read, if you believe improvements are needed, how would you improve local streets? And what is the reason for that recommendation or suggestion or?
I like that.
Yeah, it seems to be less, it does give folks the choice to, in essence, opt out, should they so choose, of that second part.
I think it also addresses Earl's point of he wants to know what people are thinking. So rather than in broader terms, if you want street improvements, give it to me on the street improvements and make it less generic or general, whatever you want to call
Yeah, we can modify all these in that spirit, no problem.
Okay. I'm being urged on, keep going. So in Q8, so we're talking about biking, walking, horseback riding. Then we get into these questions and I kind of feel the horses were left out. And I don't know if this was intentional. So greater separation of existing bike and pedestrian trails from vehicular traffic, but I don't see horses in there. And I don't know if horses should be in there. And then in the second question, additional bike and pedestrian trails and street right-of-ways. And I didn't know whether we left horses out, equestrians out. And I'm not a equestrian, so.
And neither am I. It was unintentional, but I think we want to add in to be complete. We certainly can.
As a former equestrian and someone who's been associated with Cherry Hills Village for nearly 50 years, point number one is horses are becoming an endangered species here. Relatively few people have them. The second thing is that other forms of recreational locomotion, whether it's pedestrian, bicycles, etc., tend to be either unaware or downright oblivious to what can happen if you come up rapidly behind a horse. You can spook them. You don't know what's going to happen. I realize there will be an element in Cherry Hills who will continue to lobby for what's called equestrian rights. But they're really becoming fewer and fewer. And I don't know whether it is worth our while to dwell too much on the preferences of equestrians. Typically, if you're riding a horse in the village, you want to be on one of the unpaved trails. You're not going to do it parallel to Quincy. You can, but it's not the best idea because you never know what a driver is going to do, etc. My wife, who grew up in Cherry Hills and used to ride from Bellevue to Hamden on the High Line, said she wouldn't take a horse out on the High Line today if her life depended on it. She said the bicyclist will run you over, and you don't know what's going to happen. Former Mayor Laura Christman had a pretty good go-around. I don't know whether it's actually in Cherry Hills or whether it's a crossover into Greenwood, but with the underpass where somebody just pulled a really dumb move. So addressing the concerns of equestrians, while perhaps very kind and perhaps even a bit noble and a nod to Cherry Hills history, I don't know if there's a lot of value in doing so.
I think that's a valid point. There are a few of them, and those have horses, many of them don't ride them in the village.
Well, I guess, and I agree with your assessment. I think all of that is true. But I know that the equestrian community, even though it's small, is here. And I guess to try and help, the city elders and the staff, whatever, let's say a decision was, you know what, it is an endangered species, and we need to start moving our ordinances and what have you away from that. Here's the equestrian community in there, and council's just making these decisions. And go, well, why are you guys doing it? Well, because mumble, versus look at the responses we just got. You're providing some benefit. If everybody said, hey, we think you guys are emphasizing too much on equestrian, and you got that feedback from the citizenry, it puts you in a better position then to deal with that small community. That is small, but it's pretty local. And by the way, one of the things I thought was interesting in the last council meeting, council sat back and said, we need to relook at it in the light of motorized bicycles, or self-propelled or whatever bicycles. We need to look at maybe looking at changing our trails. And I sat there and I can understand that. Nothing was said from the equestrian perspective, and I just thought, things are moving. I mean, but I'm just thinking in terms of if you want to arm the decision makers with something, you don't want that feedback from the community more broadly. So that's why I say maybe you do want to have some questions in there about equestrians to give people the opportunity. Maybe the opportunity to say, no, we like this. But the other way, which is 75% say that we're spending too much time and money on equestrian, and we don't want to spend our tax dollars on that. Does that then arm council, staff, et cetera, to start going in a different direction? I don't know, but just a thought that I had.
If we look at this question specifically, I think it's the fourth or fifth option, fourth down. It says dedicated paths for equestrian and pedestrian travel only, no bicycles. What if we actually attempted to isolate the equestrian question? Say that 5 times fast. What if we actually didn't really, this is attempting to get at, should we limit bicycles? What if we had a question that attempted to get at, what's the appetite for protecting equestrian facilities? And we eliminated the pedestrian part of that question, dedicated paths for equestrian travel. And that way, if we don't get a lot of support, it accomplishes what Earl's getting. If it does get a lot of support, then we know we need to preserve a lot of those softer, non-paved facilities. Just a thought, as a way to kind of get us without, again, leading the witness. We really want to know what is the equestrian level of support here?
I think that makes sense. If you added equestrian into the first 2 options, if people check these boxes, then the question is.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, what were they voting for? Were they voting for equestrian or bicycle or for what?
Right. I'm with you.
Does that sound like an okay approach?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
then, I feel like I'm off my sentence, but on Q9, Q9. Carol presidents have repeatedly voiced concerns with traffic using streets, major streets. All right, so in the second sentence, which of the following options would you like to see the village pursue? And I think I would strike an order, just to say pursue to better manage come through traffic. So number one, installing speed bumps along streets to discourage cut through. I don't think you need to say discourage cut through, but also I thought it was the policy of Public Works that we don't do speed bumps. So
Yeah, there's a policy that talks about certain warrants about what it takes to get speed humps, and it is a relatively high bar, as it is in most communities. But it's not off the table altogether.
Gotcha. Okay, that was really where I was going with that. Lowering posted speed limits, such as on Holly and Quincy. I don't think you need to say again to cut the discourage cut through traffic where feasible. Because the topic is cut through traffic.
Sure. Yeah, understood.
And then improving the flow of perimeter streets, building in Hampton, for example, to reduce. My question is, I don't think the city can do that. Those are state highways. And I think you're asking a question that you have nothing to do with. And so, can you? Because I don't think you can.
At a high level, I would agree. I'm not gonna push back. I'm gonna offer additional ways to look at that. The city is actually going through a process right now, coming out of the farm onto Bellevue to increase a left-hand turn process going in and out of there. It's not a signal necessarily, but it's going to reconfigure some of the medians to allow for better facilitation out of the farm onto Bellevue. Well, that theoretically could take more vehicle trips off of folks going through the interior parts to get out to Quincy, or I'm not Quincy in this case, but to University or other places like that. So, I think there are things that you could funnel or direct traffic and make access onto those arterials easier without necessarily going to I agree with you completely. We're not going to add a fourth lane. We could put that in our master plan all day long, but we're just, doing that for sport. So I could not agree more with that. That doesn't mean though that when we go to CDOT and we're asking for modifications to intersections, or Councilor Blum would love to talk about the intersection that he just got, which allows for easier on and off into Glenmore. Those are all things that absolutely do funnel traffic out of our interior road network and onto the arterial streets. So from that perspective, I would offer that this is still, maybe there's some wording we can do to clarify what that means so that folks don't assume we're going to suddenly add lanes of traffic. Oh, by heaven, no, of course not. But there are absolutely, and when we talk with CDOT, having these things in our master plan is absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. So I would encourage you not to dismiss the entire option, but maybe we can work on the wording to clarify what it really means.
Yeah, my two other comments on this. Installing roundabouts, I would add maybe a clause to reduce traffic, encourage, flow or something of that sort.
Yeah.
And then on the last one, maybe the above. I don't think you need that sentence. I would like to maintain the current access.
You don't need none of the above.
No, he's
We have
saying.
none above as your last option to mark, and then the sentence behind it. I'm not sure I have that sentence.
Oh.
I might give it a separate line. And then ask the question. So I'm just confused. None of the above. I don't know why we have, I would like to maintain the current access into the village on various streets. To me, maybe that is incomplete. because I rethink it, maybe there's none of I like the way the access works. That's essentially what you're saying.
It was trying to provide a little more description of what you mean when you check that box.
Okay, I'm fine with that, and I think I'm on with. You thought I was on with that. So then I go to Q11, and this sort of goes to the point I made earlier with these sort of studies. What is the reason behind this decision? Oh, and then, sorry, not John.
It is.
Field day. Q7, and I think this is more experimental because we've got, Mike may jump into this, that's working with Emily Black. Some of this training and storage, I don't understand it, to be quite honest.
Question 7?
Was that question 17?
Oh,
17. Real quick, before we leave that one, I'm trying not to interject too much here. Do we have to use that picture of the traffic circle around?
I don't like that, I agree with you.
Like, we have 5 different options of things that would be far less distracting that we could find pictures of.
Yeah, and that was a suggestion that I made in my written comment.
Yeah.
The point is that if you convince me, Bill, in one of our Zoom meetings, that we should ask about that roundabout, and I can commit to even skim alive on that question, that made sense. But I really felt like, I can tell you right now, when we went through the roundabout thing, you would think that we were gonna build Columbus Circle. That's what people were thinking, and like, what's wrong with you people? I mean, roundabouts can be nothing, and I just felt like if you're gonna ask the question, at least allow people to sit back and have a sense of what we're really talking about. If you really wanna have people respond to that question. So, and I think I said, there's a picture I found, maybe you can find a better one. Like, I think I told people, I said, the first time I ever encountered a roundabout was in Scotland 40 years ago, and I had to stop because sheep were crossing over. Okay, I mean, it can be a very, very rural thing. Anyway, because without it, the Columbus Circle people are gonna come out in droves and you're not gonna get a good response, and then it's almost like, why do you want to ask the question?
Right.
That was my point.
I get the fair question, I think is probably a better image.
I would agree.
So then on 17. I don't, I think it's still being explored, because
it is, yeah.
I'm just gonna sit tight. I'm kind of confused.
There's been quite a bit of back and forth on this one that I've been CC'd on, so.
I don't need to ask.
Yeah, there's not been new content added with regard to the drainage question, nor the Highline Canal question. They're both noted as in progress. Chair Lemire was going to speak with Emily and the member. So I would guess we'll get some input on that at some point.
Yes, hopefully soon. They were exchanging emails literally just last week.
Good. Well, I think by and large, I think it's great. I'm sensitive to leading the witness, as you can see, and I know how much work goes into this, and it's so hard. I appreciate everything you guys do.
So we appreciate all you guys' input these last few months.
Yeah, you get our 2 cents, and then we change our minds. So you can't be too frustrating. So, thanks for indulging.
I guess just important to note, this is about one tool we're gonna have here. You know, once we're able to do more normal activities, you know, get normal meetings and so forth, and get a lot of other ways of getting input.
And Brett, can you throw suggestions that you hear post-COVID? Because the environment has really shifted. The traffic isn't as heavy as it used to be. I mean, it's bizarre. And then we got more foot traffic on our trails. So when this survey comes out, or when it comes out, I think people's priorities post-COVID is really gonna redefine the outcome of what we think this survey may show and reflect at the end. So just keep us in the loop of anything new that you see or hear on the street, so that maybe we can incorporate some of those into our questionnaire when we're ready.
Will do.
So with that, do we have any other questions or comments, suggestions?
I'm done speaking.
Okay, then I move to recommend that city council temporarily suspends the master plan process until such time that public in-person meetings can be held. Okay?
Which one are you going to? Well,
We can do a roll call vote.
Okay?
Or up to you guys, whatever you prefer. Yeah, voice is fine.
Okay. Doris?
Doris notified that she had to sign off.
Okay. So then I guess we're all in favor?
yeah.
Aye. Okay. Moving on to item number 7, reports. Do we have any?
If you guys don't have any, staff, we have a few different reports.
Okay.
The first one is, it's not on your agenda, but I do want to take a few moments and introduce the new senior planner in the community, Paul Workman. I will let him say a few words since he'll be working with you quite extensively.
Lucky man.
Being this vice chair and member of the planning and zoning commission. Thanks, Chris. I'm excited to be here. This is the start of week number 3 for me, so I'm still trying to figure out where everything goes. In terms of where's the printer and where's the pens and all that kind of stuff. But I do look forward to working with all of you. I've been a professional planner for 12 and a half years, variety of communities and experiences. And I will say, this being my first introduction to the master plan was incredibly exciting for me to see the commitment and the thoughts that you all have, and obviously some well-earned battle scars in this community. Not a lot of communities, at least in my experience, kind of give the thought and the analysis even that you've given here this evening. So one, I want to give you kudos for that, and two, let you know that really is exciting for me as a professional to join you for this. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to working with you for many years to come.
Well, welcome and congratulations on,
Thank you.
on joining a really, really terrific staff. You're really joining a great team.
I won't tell anybody you said that, but I agree. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The second report we have, I'll let Ethan handle this one actually regarding the rules of procedure discussion.
So at next month's meeting, we want to give you guys a heads up. We're going to have some updates to the rules of procedures, including recent emails asking everybody individually about meeting start times and the 5 p.m. start consensus for both virtual meetings and in-person meetings to adopt those, as well as there will be the selection of the chair and vice chair at next month's meeting. So start thinking about that. I did talk to Mike last week. He did say he's not stuck on serving as chair again and wants everybody to know there's opportunity there.
He didn't say that he was, I don't think he was opposed to if it was decided that he wanted to be in that spot.
Correct.
He's open to that, but he's not committed to, going to campaign against anybody necessarily.
Correct. He wants everybody to know, yeah, there's future opportunity.
So look forward to that. And if you have any questions on that before the meeting, it's rules of procedure. If you have any clarifying questions, please reach out to us ahead of time on those. It'll just help make it all go a lot smoother. That was the second thing. Okay, yeah. So I think that's it for our reports.
That's it.
And from the city attorney?
No report.
Okay. So then right now it is 6:05 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.